So Golden Guardians are back with a new roster for 2020 Spring Split. And it's honestly not that impressive when you look at just the firepower that they have. And everyone is kind of wondering exactly how this team is even going to place into playoffs. Because just looking from the firepower of the names, it's clear that they aren't within that playoff contention slot. They just don't seem to have a single really big superstar on their team. I mean, yes, you can look at Haunter and say, okay, maybe he could play to his 2017 Spring Split performance self, but that's highly unlikely, I would say. Now, for the jungle position, this is the one that I think is the most interesting because it's a player that seemingly came out of nowhere, right? He's coming from the TCL. His name's Closer. And his champion pool, he's mostly known for his Talia and Graves. And funnily enough, actually, he even still played Graves in 2018. Now, if you remember, Graves was super duper OP in 2017, right? So this is after he got some of his nerfs, right? And so Closer ended up going 8-0 in the TCL Summer Split. And for those that don't know what TCL is, it's the Turkey League, right? So that's the league that had like freeze and stuff like that. And coincidentally, so his Graves performance, he only died a single fucking time in 8 games. Like that's absolutely bananas, right? So this champion was basically only banned against him and I think Fenerbahce. But he was just a monster on Graves. And now Closer, he's not a unfamiliar player when it comes to playing with big superstar names. As I mentioned before, he played with the likes of Freeze on Royal Bandits. And so Closer comes from Royal Youth, which is just a rebrand of Royal Bandits. So it's basically the same fucking team. So he played with big names like Broken Blade. He played with him over on Royal Bandits. Played with Abadage, Freeze, Dumbledoge. So it's not like he hasn't played with high class players. He's played with some of the best in the TCL. So as far as him being transported into the North American scene, it's kind of be honest. Like he's gonna be playing with about as good of people, in terms of competition and shit like that. Although Royal Youth / Royal Bandits were, one of the big powerhouses within that scene, along, of course, with Supermassive and Fenerbahce, right? 1907 Fenerbahce. So now, I don't think he's going to have that much of a problem adapting to the North American scene as long as his English is pretty good, which I actually went back and looked at some of his English interviews. I know he did one with ESPN, and his English is actually quite good. So I don't expect there to be that kind of natural barrier that most people think when it comes to an import coming into North America, say as Korean players coming over or Chinese players coming over. So I don't think that's going to exist to the high degree that everyone might think at firsthand. But I think Closer in terms of just him trying to adapt to North American playstyle of our famous NA RAM, it's gonna be a little bit different, right? So as long as he can do that, then I think he'll perform pretty well. And I think this is a really good scouting pickup that whoever scouted this guy is pretty good job, I think. Well, although we'll hold our judgment until we actually see him play, because a lot of the times rookies don't perform that well on their starting split or even the split afterwards, right? And that's not to say that he's a full rookie either. He did play in one of the most prestigious secondary wildcard regions. So he's at the pinnacle of what could be considered the pinnacle of the lower level play. So we'll see how he works out within Golden Guardians. Speaking of Golden, we have Golden Glue finally made it to a fucking starting roster. Big ups to him. He's been grinding forever. So, no salt thrown for that at least. But, from a brand perspective, this is like his really big chance to actually make a name for himself. And like, yes, of course, because of the Golden Guardians Golden Glue meme, like GG, but also it does put him in a spotlight finally of, okay, this is your big shot. You know, you have gotten a starting spot over, you know, the likes of like Pobelter and DeMonte. So you better make sure that you perform at least adequately to where, you know, your people put you in the top or upper echelon of what they consider a good mid laner within North American LCS. So this is his time to prove it, if there's any time at all, because all eyes are on him at this point. Now, in the right mind frame, I think Golden Glue can actually be pretty good. He has had his shining moments, right? I mean, everyone remembers that game in 2018 Summer Split where Cloud9 is going against Team Liquid in the regular season, and that's when Golden Glue and Svenskeren just completely destroyed Pobelter in the mid lane. I think Svenskeren was playing Lee Sin, and I want to say Golden Glue was playing like Syndra, and they just completely demolished Pobelter over and over again through the mid, diving through the fucking mid tier 1 tower, like everything, completely shutting the entire mid section of the map down. So it's clear that Golden Glue can play very aggressive, especially if his jungler is playing aggressive as well too. So I think if we look at these two players kind of matching together, you know, uniquely, it seems from Closer's champion pool, at least, that he's a very aggro player, right? Similar to what Svenskeren was back in the day. And by that, I don't mean that he's not aggressive now. It's that now he has this intelligence about him. But before, it was like this unbridled aggression, right? Without even really much thought. Right, he was just a invade you and hope the shit works, right? So hopefully with Closer's aggression is that it will kind of unlock Golden Glue and, you know, unlock his what he is supposedly known for, of being a scrim god, right? Or getting advantages in lane and then snowballing that across the rest of the map. So hopefully we'll see a different side of Golden Glue that we've never seen. But that's to be said, and I hold a lot of reservations against that. But luckily, there are two rookie-esque, you know, players in mid from Ica and Realma. So, I mean, he does have a little bit of leeway in terms of at least, hopefully, being able to play against these players at a better level or a higher level than them. Of course, Ica comes from Europe, so that's going to be a little bit more difficult. But if he can't really topple these two players, I'm going to be really unimpressed by Golden Glue. So that's one of the bigger criterias, at least, that he first has to pass in terms of him being a good mid lane player, is just beating out these players which are out of their element, right? One from Oceania and one from Europe, that are coming to North America and have to readapt to the whole style of North America and everything in between. So hopefully he has that advantage in the Spring Split and he comes, you know, just kind of plowing through and getting some early advantages. So now the bot lane, I have a really fucking big problem with this shit. Because, all right, you have FBI as the AD carry or the bot laner, right, as it's called nowadays, and then Keith as support. Now you have this this guy who really hasn't played too much, right, in FBI in the bot lane being supported by Keith, who failed at ADC, and now you want to put him as support and hope that he succeeds there because he couldn't at ADC. Like, what the fuck is this dumpster fire? Like, it's gonna be a dumpster fire, and I'm sad to say, but Keith, he wasn't even particularly good in lane, and so now you're expecting him, which according to that Golden Guardians announcement video, like behind the scenes, that they just wanted him to dominate lane, but he had like a fundamental desync with all of his supports over the years anyway. So it, like, why do you expect that to change if he then just takes the position of support? I don't really get that whole thought process. So it just seems like what they wanted to do was really just save money. Right, Golden Guardians, funnily, they had said in that Golden Guardians video, that they proposed to Keith that he should play support because they couldn't get Hakuho. And so, like, this is like the second option type of thing, It's like he was totally put on the back burner, and he's like that guy who comes up after the girl broke up with her boyfriend, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm here," and she's like, "Yeah, I mean, I guess. All right, let's get this fucking over with." So, like, Keith is he's the bounce back man. So it's shitty because he could have still tried to grind and tried to at least come up with a different strategy to come back. But instead, now everyone's just kind of doubting him this entire time. And then if he fails on this, he's completely donezo. I think his career is over. And he's gambling all of his chips on just this one try. And maybe he is like so desperate that he thinks that he can't get another chance anyway, so he might as well just gamble on this one. But that seems to be somewhat more short-sighted. And I highly doubt that Keith is going to be an excellent support. So, then of course you have Haunter, top lane. Haunter's good. We all know he's good. So, there's nothing new there. And there's one of two things that Haunter can do in this situation, right? He can carry, right? Like it was 2017. But in turn, he might look like an idiot sometimes by trying to carry too hard, right? And so he ends up essentially pinning himself against the wall because people are going to expect him to carry, right? Enemy teams are going to expect him to carry, so therefore they're going to just try and shut him down as much as possible. It's an easy plan to see ahead of time, so you just either ban out Haunter, ban his GP, or whatever the fuck, and you play from there, right? So you're already making Haunter start from ground zero if it's just that. Or he plays passively and tries to patch all of the holes in the entirety of his roster. So pretty much in both circumstances, he's kind of fucked. And I wish he would go more towards the carry route and try and take the reins of controlling the team and putting himself in a favorable position, which then puts his entire team in a favorable position. But if he tries to play passive, I don't see him having enough ability to patch all of the holes in the entire roster. I just think there's too much shit to patch up, with the bot lane probably going to be a complete disaster, right? So it's two people that you can't fucking rely on. And then you have this jungler who I think is probably going to pan out pretty good just because of the experience that he's had over in the TCL and with the players that he's played with, and him, those veteran players teaching him about macro and about rotations and about just jungle play overall. I think that guy will be pretty good. But then you have Golden Glue that needs to step up too. And so you have all these different factors that Haunter is pretty much in no control of. And it might just all fall apart in laning phase, which would really suck. And there's nothing that you can do about that, being as a top laner way up in, the island up there. So honestly think this is a last place roster. It's just there are too many things that can go wrong. There's so much shit that could just completely destroy and blow up the entire roster when it comes to a game plan. And I don't see any really big strong points within the roster. I mean, even Haunter, he is a good top lane player. He's at least, I would say, top 4, bare minimum. But that's not enough to carry an entire team, at this level in North American LCS, unless you're like the Shy or something. So, but Haunter's not. So you need to have someone extraordinarily better than most of the other top laners and then able to trickle that experience down over into the rest of the roster. And I just don't think Haunter's in a position to do that. No offense to him. So I think this is really just a last place roster. I think it's a place filler, if that. And I don't see any hope for Golden Guardians. Hopefully, Golden Glue proves me wrong and is just a complete beast. Hopefully, Keith is, at least adequate at support to give his ADC a chance in order to grow and learn. But I just don't think any of these things are going to happen. And I think this is just a roster that honestly stands no chance in the LCS come 2020 Spring Split.